And when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
And if we're talking tight ends and we're going into round 2, maybe round 3, give me Ian Thomas, please. Let's just do the damn thing.
Just based on giving his overall ability. Again, I like his arm. I think he can make every throw.
The pick at number 12 is in.
Welcome to Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. I am Russell Brown. Joining me, as always, on a Tuesday night, CP Christian Page. CP, how we doing, my man?
I'm doing well. A lot of free agency stuff to catch up on.
Yeah, we took a break from the Combine last week. We did a bunch of written content, which you guys can check out over at cover1.net. You can also find that on the Cover One app. If you haven't done so already, get to your app store, Google Play, however you go about your business, and download the Cover One app. Very simple. Search Cover One, and then you just have to download it, and you have it right in the palm of your hand. But we've got written content out there for the Combine of what to expect out of the defensive line groups, what we saw out of linebackers, out of cornerbacks and safeties, a ton of great stuff. So check that out. But let's jump into free agency because that is the talk of the town. And we're hoping that right now, as we sit here and we record on a Tuesday night, we're hoping that we get something on Le'Veon Bell signing with the team so we can just give an immediate reaction. But I know what's going to happen. We're going to wrap this up, and then in like 2 hours, he will sign at like 9 o'clock or right before midnight when he drops his quote-unquote mixtape.
Oh, my goodness. I didn't even know he was going to do that stuff. But, yeah, I mean, it's interesting the world we live in with social media and everything, how players literally dictate where they want to go. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I mean, it's nice for them to have the freedom. But, the whole Antonio Brown situation, it looked like Brandon Beane and the Pittsburgh Steelers worked out a deal for him to be shipped over to the Buffalo Bills. And then I guess it was reported that AB's like, well, I'm not even going to show up. And then the Bills and Brandon Beane were like, well, all right, let's pump the brakes on it. We don't want him. And then, of course, now he's in Oakland. So there's a lot of power in the players. Again, I don't think it's a huge issue, but it could cause some issues down the road. But it doesn't help when Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, two of the bigger divas in the sport, are having the same kind of power delegated across the land. So it's definitely interesting, though. It makes the offseason really fun.
Yeah, no, it really does. I mean, this is the favorite time of the year for everybody. As we were talking pre-show, I mean, it's got, free agency in a week. We've got the March Madness, and then once we get through March Madness, it's April, and it's basically the closing days of pro days for college athletes that are going pro, and then we get into the draft, and it's amazing. And it's like we're pretty much getting to like the final stretch of the 2019 NFL draft, and then basically we hit reset for the 2020 draft, which is crazy. But I want to jump into free agency, and I guess we could start in the direction of the number one team on the board, the Arizona Cardinals. They're picking first. We've heard the things of Charlie Casserly calling out Kyler Murray and then retracting those statements and calling out Josh Rosen. And like I said pre-show, he must have either had mixed sources or mixed reactions of Kyler Murray and hearing that he was bad at the Combine, and then actually got a legitimate source that said, hey, he did well, and it does sound like the Cardinals are taking him first overall, which I think we both agree that they shouldn't do that. But he then comes out and he says that, Josh Rosen is garbage, this, and that, and that they're going to move on from Josh Rosen. But as you look at what they've done in free agency, it doesn't really reflect anything of what they're going to do with the first pick of the draft. Now, maybe they take Kyler Murray, maybe they pass and they take Nick Bosa, but I mean, they signed Jordan Hicks, the linebacker, 4-year deal for $36 million. Terrell Suggs, they've added him. And then J.R. Sweezy, the offensive guard, who I think is a decent play to plug inside at guard. What are we thinking for them as far as what they're doing? Is anything impacting what they should do at one, or are we still sold that it's Kyler Murray? And what do you think of the moves?
I'm still not necessarily sold it's Kyler Murray. I know all the arrows are pointed in that direction for Murray to be the number one overall pick to Arizona. Of course, we talked about, the agent connection between Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury. Of course, Kingsbury's comments when he was at Texas Tech say, hey, I want that guy to be my quarterback. I would pick him number one overall. But like you said, if the free agency moves right now reflect anything what they're going to do in the draft, there's no indication whatsoever of whatever way they're swaying. If you're looking at the defensive line or at the quarterback position, I don't think there's really a home run signing here. I know Jordan Hicks, pretty productive player overall, coming over from Philadelphia, but Terrell Suggs, 1 year, $7 million. That doesn't do really anything for me. They got Robert Alford to come over from Atlanta. I thought that was kind of an underrated thing. That was a little while ago, but not many big signings to indicate yes they're 100% going all in on Kyler Murray at number one. And even if they're not making the moves, at least at this time on Tuesday night, where it looks like they're going to help Josh Rosen out a bunch. Because sure, you have David Johnson, a really solid running back. Larry Fitzgerald, most likely his last year. And so, but there's just not many other pieces there. I know Christian Kirk evolved as a key piece last year, but there's just not a lot of pieces there, or not a lot of moves made to say, hey, we still feel comfortable with Josh Rosen. Let's help him out, because that's not happening right now. And I always think when you invest a first-round pick into a quarterback, that year in the draft or in free agency in years 1 and year 2, you need to somehow develop something around him, whether it's up front or on the outside or in the backfield, that would make them feel comfortable and put them in the right spot to succeed. Doesn't look like Arizona's really doing that now, even if it's not for Rosen, but they're not even going to do that for Kyler Murray if that is the pick at number one.
Well, and what I envision and what I think should happen, I know it's kind of a stretch, but okay, they're picking first. They have the 33rd pick in the draft. They have the 65th pick, the 104th pick, and then they've got a ton of 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks. I mean, they've got 3 7th round picks, 3 6th round picks. So they're going to be very active on the 3rd day of the draft. And that's probably where they're going to see a ton of actions. And they could certainly move these picks and get back into the 3rd round, get into the back end of the 2nd round. No doubt about that. But you have Josh Rosen. Build around Josh Rosen. I agree with you there. And what I think they need to do is if Oakland is serious and if they go all in on this offensive rebuild or restructure. Now, it seems like Derek Carr's their guy. That's what it seems like now. A few weeks ago or a week ago at the Combine, it seemed like maybe, and it still could be this way. I know Benjamin Albright, very reliable source, he put out there that they want Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, and Kyler Murray. That's what it sounds like Gruden wants to do. Well, if that's the case, obviously they would move on from Derek Carr. They've already added Antonio Brown. We'll see what happens with Le'Veon Bell. But if I'm the Cardinals, why wouldn't I just go ahead and call Oakland and say, hey, you want the first pick, you want Kyler Murray, give me this, this, and that. And maybe you don't necessarily get the King's ransom, but just move from 1 to 4. Quentin Williams probably would fall in your lap at that point. And if he doesn't, oh well, you can take Josh Allen if he's there, Nick Bosa if he's there. You're getting one of those 3 players, because you would assume Kyler Murray's going to be the guy. And then at that point, you take a player, and even if you don't want one of those players, take DK Metcalf. We just talked about rebuilding around Josh Rosen and putting weapons around him. I know DK Metcalf at 4 is very rich, but, I mean, and again, this is where we can tie the Combine into certain things, but we all saw what he did at the Combine. He tested off the charts. I mean, the guy is a freak. I know the agility drills didn't necessarily go where you wanted them to go, but at 4.3, 340, and at his size, at 6'3", 228, and just being absolutely yoked, 27 reps in the bench, a 40.5-inch vertical. I mean, the guy is explosive. He's big. He's a vertical threat. He would be a great addition with Josh Rosen, but it's really tough to navigate because they didn't make all the moves yet. They could still make some moves. But with Chandler Jones, Terrell Suggs, that's not a bad pairing on the outside. So it's making me believe that it's either going to be a trade back for a team to get Kyler Murray, or they're taking Kyler Murray. That's what I believe. But I personally want them to take Quentin Williams.
No, I think Quentin Williams would set perfectly. And, the Robert Kendiche situation that hasn't worked out in their favor, and I think you get a guy with potentially similar versatility. I mean, I think Quentin could play on the nose. He could play as a 3-tech. And depending on what defensive alignment you want to use, I think you could just, throw him in a pass rushing situation if you wanted to put him, squeeze him out maybe at the 5-tech, or just, he's just that dynamic of a player, whether it's inside out. And I think Quentin Williams would fit perfectly of something that they really haven't had since Calais Campbell left town. So I think that would be something that they should definitely consider, because I think both of us are going to have Quinnen Williams as our number one overall player. And when you have the number one pick, you pick the number one overall player. I know it doesn't always add up that way based on team needs and quarterbacks and this, that, and the other. But I definitely think, hey, you have your quarterback from a year ago. Sure, it's not the guy that you picked, but I think he is smart enough. And if you can trust his durability going forward, definitely think Josh Rosen's the quarterback to work with. Got your quarterback a year ago. He has one season under his belt. And then you get potentially the number one overall player in the class to work around. Those are your two foundation pieces on both sides of the ball. That's how you move forward in an organization like Arizona. I don't think having quarterback controversy and worrying about trading Josh Rosen, a rookie quarterback that had his bumps and bruises but showed potential, I don't think that's necessarily the recipe for success. Now, looking back, 3 or 4 years now in hindsight, then I may sound like a fool right now saying that. But I definitely think of what I know now, I think they need to stick to Rosen, build around him, and then pick potentially Nick Bosa or Quinnen Williams, the top two players in the 2019 draft.
Yeah, I'm with you. And if they do that, great. If not, well, then they're idiots. And moving on from Rosen could be a big mistake. Who knows? But and this wouldn't be the first time that an organization gives up on a quarterback after 1 year. Atlanta Falcons did it with Brett Favre. Obviously, it was a different situation. But he went to Green Bay, and obviously he was a second-round pick, not the 10th overall pick, whatever. But he went to Green Bay, and we all know what he did, had a very great career. Obviously, he went to the Jets and the Vikings, but it is what it is. We all know what Brett Favre was able to do on the field. And Josh Rosen, I think – I'm not saying he's Brett Favre, but he can make plenty of the throws on the field. So it brings me up to my next question, then we'll move on from Rosen and the Cardinals, and we'll get to some other teams in the top 10 and then really the rest of free agency of just winners and losers or, however we want to go about that. But with Josh Rosen, we obviously are hearing that he's maybe being made available. It seems like that's a pretty good chance, and there's a strong likelihood that he's going to get dealt between now and the draft. So if they move on from him, do you have a destination that you would like to see him go? Or do you have a destination that you're predicting for him to go to?
Man, that's tough. I mean, you could think about like a team like Jacksonville, but then they made the move that they want Nick Foles to be their long-term quarterback, at least for the next 3 or 4 years. And then, if Oakland was a player at one point, they're not going to be anymore because it sounds like, Derek Carr, if there's not their guy, then they may potentially move into Kyler Murray. I know that puts a kind of a wrench into the question there, but maybe New York. I know that was a team that the New York Giants, that is. I know that was a team that last year there was a lot of buzz surrounding Josh Rosen. And, if they would really pick a running back at number 2, obviously they did with Saquon Barkley. He had a killer rookie season. But still, there's some pieces to work with there in New York. And if Dave Gettleman wants to make that call, even though I know they've bought into Eli Manning for a couple more years, then I think that would be a good situation for Josh Rosen to work under Pat Shurmur. And that could be Pat Shurmur, his quarterback that he could work with and really stamp, his legacy in New York. I know that might be a little premature to say, but if you have a guy, if you can find a way to keep Odell Beckham Jr. in town and not ship him off to Cleveland or whatever the reports are now, I think you could work with that. Evan Ingram, Saquon Barkley, and Josh Rosen. I think that's a really solid offense and could really do some damage in that division. So I guess just to throw a team out there, the New York Giants would be, I think, a pretty good fit for Josh Rosen. Yeah,
I like the Giants as well. They've got a ton of picks really between, rounds 4 and 7. So that third day of the draft, they've got they actually have 4 fifth-round picks. They've got a 4th-round pick, and then they've got 2 7ths and a 6th. So they pick in the 1st and 2nd round at 6 and 37, and then they don't pick again until pick 109. So I know the asking price was probably a 3rd-round pick. So I've been trying to find a team that's got, a decent amount of players on their team, and then, a 3rd-round pick, and the Giants don't have that. And actually their 3rd-round pick is forfeited. So I don't know why that is. I'll have to research that. That's interesting.
I believe that was a supplemental draft pick.
Oh, okay. All right. That makes sense.
Sam Beal, the Western Michigan cornerback from last year. So they forfeited that 3rd-round pick. So
what a bunch of idiots. But all right. Well, the teams that I would suggest, and I'm throwing in a wild card, but the team that I think makes a lot of sense that could use him right away is Miami. I don't know how it would be for transitioning him from one offense to the other, but I think Miami, Brian Flores there, The only real signing they've done is Dwayne Allen. It sounds like they're moving on from guys, and I think they've already made this official. They're going to move on from guys like Robert Quinn, Cameron Wake. So a couple of other names on their defensive line they're moving on from. Clearly it didn't work out for certain players there. Cameron Wake, great career in Miami, but if you're moving on from Ryan Tannehill as well, then maybe Josh Rosen there would be ideal. But I'm going to throw a curveball into it, and I think Denver should consider it. I know it sounds crazy. I know they added Joe Flacco. They made some trades, and right now they've been making moves to free agency where they're adding players to their offense and defense, and it's veteran players, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Like Kareem Jackson, 3-year, $33 million deal for a 30-year-old corner. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Jawan James, offensive tackle, 4-year contract for $51 million. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but I think Jawan James is still relatively young. I think he's like 26, 27. So that I can understand. Yeah, he's 26. So that I can understand. He was a good player for Miami, but I just like Denver going after Joe Flacco just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But they've got the draft capital, I think, to at least pull some type of move out there and make it happen. Like maybe you give up a 3rd-round pick next year and a 5th-round pick this year, and you go out and you get Josh Rosen. And, yeah, he sits behind Joe Flacco. Probably not the best thing for him, but I don't know. It's probably unlikely because they're in a win-now mode. So who knows? We'll see. But let's move forward. Let's move to Oakland and what they've done. I think I like what they're doing. I am not saying, signing Trent Brown for all that money is a great idea, and especially after you drafted Brandon Parker before Justin Reed was off the board, before Fred Warner were off the board, 2 notable players so far during their rookie years, and you passed on them for Brandon Parker to basically be a backup swing tackle. You have Colton Miller, he should move to right tackle anyways, regardless of what anybody says. And then you have Trent Brown, who it sounds like with that type of money, almost $37 million guaranteed, probably playing left tackle for you. But then they added Antonio Brown. They have LaMarcus Joyner to a big contract too at 4 years, $42 million. What do you think of the AB deal? What do you think of the Trent Brown deal? Do you think they're done? Do you think they add Le'Veon? Do you think they add Kaiir Murray? I got tons of questions for Oakland. What are you thinking?
How was Oakland able to keep every 1st-round pick and still obtain Antonio Brown?
I know.
How in the world, if you're Pittsburgh and said, just give us one of them. It doesn't have to be your first one. It can be your last one. I don't understand that. Kudos to Mike Mayock for going completely Bill Belichick and the Patriots on him, because I don't know how that's possible. I don't know how you feel comfortable sleeping at night if you're in the Pittsburgh's front office and you're sitting there like, oh, yeah, we finally got rid of AB. Wait, we finally got rid of a Hall of Fame receiver for a 3rd and a 5th-round pick? That's not cutting it for me. So that's what I thought of. Kudos to Oakland. I know you're still going to have to pay them a lot because, they're restructuring the deal and this, that, and the other. But I definitely think they've made the right moves to say, hey, we're not going to be, stomped on for X amount of years. We're going to go into potentially whenever we move into Vegas, we're going to be a team that's going to have to teams are going to have to come in here and beat us to get to the playoffs. So I definitely think the moves that they made, LaMarcus Joyner, sure, it's a lot of money, but I think he's shown his ability that he could definitely be a focal point in a defensive backfield. Trent Brown, like you said, I think him playing in New England, it made them think, or it made the media perception of him was a lot higher than probably he actually is. He's an average tackle. I don't think he's top money tackle. I mean, I think you can make an argument he's a top 15 tackle, but he's not a top 2 or 3 tackle like he's getting paid. But then you had Donovan Smith at Tampa Bay who's getting paid nearly the same thing, and he's right there in the same boat. Average players, they haven't earned, to me, that left tackle caliber money. But I do understand the moves here, and I get what Oakland's trying to do. And if it's going to put them in position to, whether give Derek Carr one final year and another year with Gruden and see how it works out, even if it doesn't, you still have the pieces there that if a newcomer comes in, say Kaiir Murray, then I definitely think that quarterback will be in a position to succeed. Of course, they need to clean up some things on defense, especially the defensive front. They need to find more pass rushers, of course. But I definitely do like the moves. Even though their pockets are almost empty right now, I definitely do understand, and I do like the moves. But I do think that there's a lot more pieces that to fill out before we can even even think about talking about the playoffs.
Well, it's funny you mentioned playoffs, and I know you're giving mad kudos to Mike Mayock, and I agree. But I honestly think that right now, Oakland is in a better situation than Pittsburgh is. And I know that sounds crazy. Like, Russ, what are you talking about? They've got Juju. They've got Big Ben. They've got James Conner. I know they're going to lose Bell and Brown and this and that. But, like, they're picking 20th. They need an inside linebacker, and they're probably going to have to settle for Mac Wilson because Devin Bush is going to be off the board. Devin White's going to be off the board. Devin White's probably going 5 to Tampa. Devin Bush could very well go to Detroit at 8. That's probably the earliest he would go, to be honest. But, like, he's probably a top 15 pick for what he did at the Combine. But Pittsburgh, like, they've got a ton of picks. Like, they've got 4 picks in the top 85. They've got a 4th-round pick, a 5th-round pick, 2 6th-round picks, and a 7th-round pick. So, like, having those 2 3rd-round picks and then going, pick 20, pick 52, they can do some things. And I'm not saying, like, they're going to draft bad, but you're losing Antonio Brown. You're losing Le'Veon Bell. I just have, like, a hard time believing that Pittsburgh's going to just come out next year and be better than they are right now.
Yeah, because there's not many pieces there that you can feel hopeful for not only next year, but the future. Well, and I forgot about, we were talking about Arizona not really structuring their offense around the quarterback. I did forget that Marcus Gilbert is now an Arizona Cardinal. So that is one thing going forward, but that's another reason why Pittsburgh may fall off the rails a little bit. I know Marcus Gilbert wasn't the greatest tackle, but he was good enough, and he was still a piece to helping that running game really, come together. But no, I'm definitely with you. You lose a lot of pieces, and I just don't – there's too much dysfunction there. But maybe it's a good thing for the Pittsburgh organization to figuratively blow up, to get to a point where they can feel good about moving forward, because there's a lot of pieces or a lot of drama-filled players there. You got rid of AB. You're going to get rid of Lev Bell. Big Ben's going to retire soon. You have to make a decision on Mike Tomlin. So it may be a good thing for Pittsburgh for them just almost bottom out and just, suck it up for a few years just to get in the right direction, because this whole drama situation over the past 4 or 5 years hasn't done them any favors. So maybe it's a good thing that they're kind of cleaning house, so to speak, to maybe put them in the right direction. But I'm with you. I don't see a silver lining right now with Pittsburgh for next year or going forward.
Yeah, well, and the thing is too, like, if they wanted to do this the right way, like, obviously you're restructuring your entire offense by getting rid of key players. Obviously, there's more to the situation than that. There's obviously some locker room chemistry issues, and it could be Antonio Brown, it could be Big Ben, and he's still there. He's not going anywhere. He's going to retire a Pittsburgh Steeler. But, like, my opinion, the best way to do it is rebuild your defense, and you need a linebacker really bad. The 2 best linebackers in the draft aren't going to be there. And, okay, so I'm not saying, like, you can't take a defensive player at 20 now. You certainly can. You could take an edge rusher, depending on who's there. But, like, Montez Sweat used to be rumored at that spot. He's not going to be there anymore. You have, maybe Cleveland Farrell. Does he really fit? Probably not. So now you need maybe a defensive back. Okay, well, Greedy Williams, maybe he's there, but maybe he's not. But we're talking Pittsburgh. They don't know how to draft defensive backs. So it's like,
no.
What am I supposed to really believe that's going to happen? Like, sure, they can still put up points, but they've got to be able to stop teams, because Baker Mayfield, I think, is going to just take another step forward next year. And sure, the Bengals aren't much, but you still have the Ravens, and we'll get to the Ravens because I think they're the biggest loser in the free agency so far. But, like, there's just so much wrong with Pittsburgh right now, and I agree. I think they should probably do some things and figure out how to draft better, because they're gonna need to start drafting better, because these picks are going to really matter right now. And they've got quite a few picks, but they've got to make sure they hit the nail on the head if they're going to win now. So let's move to the rest of free agency. I think I could probably ask you one last question for the top 10. And I know we went on a rant with Pittsburgh, who's picking 20th, but with how free agency has gone so far, and I know you're going to write an article about this, but how has this shaped free agency? How has it shaped the top 10? Do you have anything that you are predicting right now?
Yeah, a couple things. One, talking about Jacksonville signing Nick Foles for 4 years. That was a popular pick for, throughout draft season, whether it was Murray, whether it was Haskins, whether it was Daniel Jones, Drew Lock. Well, it looks like they're not even going to sniff a quarterback now in the top 10. So that shakes up other things, where the other quarterback's going to fall. Denver, the same thing. Could they still draft a quarterback at 10? Yeah, they could. Do I think it's a smart choice? Not necessarily. But like you said, how comfortable do they feel going forward with Joe Flacco? So that's another team that was in the quarterback conversation in the top 10. But I think the biggest mover from a team perspective, I think, was Detroit, because you talk about you talk about their top primary needs in this draft. It was a pass rusher. It was some depth or, just some consistency in that back end and the cornerback. And then it was a consistent tight end. And just based on them being spenders in free agency, Trey Flowers comes over from New England. You got Justin Coleman coming over from Seattle to kind of play, whether he plays an outside corner role or if you want to slip him inside the slot, he brings some good versatility and some reliability in a secondary that needs it. Then you bring in Jesse James. Sure, he's not a phenomenal tight end, but I think if you work him into the system, you can kind of mold him in who you want. So I think from a team perspective, which is a good thing, I think it's kind of, ambiguous of what Detroit's going to do there at 8, because it seems like they're quickly checking off their team needs based on their free agent signings. And I think also Tampa Bay locking up both tackles, at least for another year, definitely helps them going forward. I think both of them could be upgraded. We're talking about Donovan Smith at left tackle, but at right tackle, if Dotson is the guy that they think to be long-term, I think he's upper in age. I forget his age right now. But definitely there's been quite a bit of shakeup in that top 10 that kind of throws a wrench into, what teams are going to do in the top 10. But definitely from a quarterback perspective, Jacksonville and Denver shake things up for sure.
Yeah, well, and teams in the top 10, and I will talk about the Lions in a minute, but I do want to talk about a team in the top 10 real fast, and that's the Buffalo Bills. I know, we obviously have a ton of devoted Buffalo Bills fans, subscribers to Cover One, but I like what they've done.
They've been busy.
I like what they've done. I mean, the Cole Beasley deal, a little much for me, but the John Brown deal, I can live with that. Frank Gore didn't make a whole lot of sense, but it is what it is. Kevin Johnson, if everything goes right, it should be a good pick. I mean, he's a former first-round pick. Clearly not a number one corner, but you can pair him up with Trey White. It should be okay for you. Tyler Kroft, you're getting a tight end at the going rate for the position. Doesn't take you out of position to draft a quarter or to draft a tight end. I can deal with that. Mitch Morse, 4 years, $44.5 million, a little much, but you're getting a starting caliber center that hopefully just plays all 16 games and builds chemistry with your quarterback, which I think is very important to have in today's league. You get Ty Neshko or Neshke or however the hell you say his name, maybe the best swing tackle in football, and then Jordan Phillips, he re-upped the deal to stay as a defensive tackle. So they've been very active. They got 2 or 3 weapons for Josh Allen, and they're staying on the path of running the football. Yeah, you get an aging vet like Frank Gore. He's probably going to touch the ball 100 times if you're lucky, 120 times at most. That's okay. He's effective. If he's still getting 3.5, 4 yards per carry and getting a couple of scores near the goal line, it's effective. And he can catch passes out of the backfield. So I like what they've done. They needed to put a focus on offense. I'm very curious as to what they do in the draft. I think looking at a right tackle is very much in the cards for them. I like either Cody Ford or Jawan Taylor for them. Jonah Williams would be a natural fit out of Alabama. But again, who knows how that's going to play out when you see what Oakland's done. I mean, they traded away, how do you say his name? Kelshi Ashmole or something like that?
Simile is how you say his last name.
Simile.
First name, I don't care. Yeah.
Whatever. I'm terrible with names. We all know this. So they traded him away. They need some interior line help. Jonah Williams, they're saying the highest ceiling for him is inside. I think he's a left tackle. You agree with me. He's the most technically sound offensive lineman here. He could be the 4th pick of the draft if Oakland stays there. You never really know. And then they would just move him to guard. A little rich for a guard, I agree. And they also have 3 first-round picks. So we'll see what happens. But the Bills definitely need a right tackle, and I think Cody Ford or Jawan Taylor would be great fits. But enough of Buffalo. Let me get on Detroit real fast, and then we'll get to our quick, probably our biggest winner, biggest loser, and then get out of here for free agency. But with the Lions, I've got to talk about this real fast. And they signed 3 former Patriots, Justin Coleman, Trey Flowers, Danny Amendola. Trey Flowers, a ton of money, and at the way some of these deals have been shaping up to be, you got him for basically a steal at $16 million per season, and right now his cap hit is like 6.5 for the season. But the biggest problem is he's not a double-digit sack guy, but he is a player that's going to get a ton of QB hurries, a ton of quarterback hits, pressures, all that key stuff. Justin Coleman, strictly a slot guy. That's what he did all of last season. The year before, he played some outside corner, but he's primarily a slot corner. 4 years, $36 million. They have not broken down the cap structure of that yet, but that's a rich contract for a player that's going to be playing in the slot. But it makes sense because the Lions, they run the dime package 3rd or 4th most in the league. So when you've got 4 corners on the field, you need to have at least 2 or 3 good ones. Justin Coleman makes a lot of sense. Darius Slay's obvious. Maybe they draft one at 8. And then Danny Amendola, veteran guy underneath. It's a 1-year deal. I don't care what they signed him for. Who cares? That's $4.5 million. I didn't want Adam Humphries. I didn't want Cole Beasley. So I'm cool with it. And then Jesse James, it's the best contract in the world. He's got a $2.2 million cap hit. 11 of this is guaranteed money, but a 4-year deal. They can opt out after 2 years. They can still draft a tight end. But the biggest thing, they went crazy with the money because this is Bob Quinn's 4th NFL draft now as a GM. The pressure is now on him. And I think he's on the hot seat. And I think this is simply Martha Ford and the Fords saying, hey, you need to start winning some football games. Your Patriot players are out there. If you trust them and you want them in your system and you want to do this your way and the Patriot way, then you need to go sign your guys. We'll open up the checkbook. Go get your guys and start winning some football games, please. And as a fan, please start winning some freaking football games.
No,
So,
I totally agree. It's kind of win now mode, and they're showing that right now, and they're definitely taking advantage. Sure, they might be all former Patriot guys, and whatever the narrative wants to be with Matt Patricia and everything, following the mold of Bill Belichick. But hey, if it's a winning mold, I have no problem with it. But I definitely think they, again, like I said, I think one of the teams from a team perspective of everybody picking in the top 10, I think they've checked a lot of boxes based on needs. Just hopefully it works out for some of the money they're dishing out.
Yeah, well, speaking of teams that are dishing out money, we obviously that brings us to winners and losers, and this is obvious. Like teams that spend a ton of money, it doesn't necessarily mean something. And I try to tell people, like coworkers, that they want Le'Veon Bell, they want Antonio Brown, they want all the big name superstar guys, and I'm like, that doesn't mean success. Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown didn't bring a championship to Pittsburgh. Didn't happen. And it doesn't mean it's going to happen. It could happen, but it not necessarily going to happen for Detroit or the Giants or the Titans or whoever you're a fan of. But at the same time, all these teams are spending a ton of money. Who was the biggest winner, in your opinion, out of the teams that spent the money?
I'm going to go with a team that I feel like every single draft we always say they need a pass rusher, and it never seems to come true. And that's the Green Bay Packers. They spent a lot of money. I get it. But they were in need of – they're always in need, again, of the pass rusher. And sure, Clay Matthews was good in his prime, but obviously he trickled down. But Zadarius Smith coming over from Baltimore, Preston Smith coming over from Washington. Sure, they're going to combine for over $100 million. But it seems like it's something they've always struggled with is rushing the passer. And that's something that they got better at. And then, of course – they signed one of the more underrated defensive backs, underrated player. I'll go to that extent. Adrian Amos, the free safety out of Chicago. I think that's a perfect fit that you can move him in there, figure out how you want to scheme with them. Clinton Dix is no longer there. And so I think from defensive standpoint, and that's a question we've always really had about Green Bay. Of course, we can talk about receivers and helping out Aaron Rodgers this way. We can talk about that until we're blue in the face. But I definitely think defensively, that is something that they've always left unchecked in the offseason. They definitely got a lot better this week.
I like what the Packers did. I'll be honest. I'm very jealous of the free agent signings that they did. Now, they opened up the checkbook, no doubt about it. I mean, sure. the contracts are a little wild. I mean, Preston Smith, 4 years, $52 million, cool. Zadarius Smith, 4-year contract, $66 million. But it's a lot of money, but at the same time, this is the Packers. They're going to make it work. I mean, it's very rare for them to have a signing that just blows up in their face. So I like the moves that they made, Billy Turner, both Smiths, and then Adrian Amos. And as I mentioned earlier, the Steelers don't know what they're doing, right? Well, they go out and they sign free agent corner Steven Nelson, 3-year deal, $25.5 million for a guy that's not worth that much. So congratulations to Pittsburgh. You join a team like Detroit for overpaying for cornerbacks. But
they can't draft him or sign him well.
Yeah, like Steven Nelson's not bad, and I liked him. I liked him at Oregon State, but Jesus, man, come on. All right, Jets are my winner. I know a lot of money towards C.J. Mosley, but I like what they've done on the offensive side of the football with Josh Bellamy and Jamison Crowder, and I was hoping, and like I agree, you hit the nail on the head with the Packers. They would be my ultimate winner, but I like what the Jets have done. C.J. Mosley. That was a big need for them, and they brought him in. Now it's a lot of money. I know it's highest paid linebacker in the league, but Jamison Crowder, Josh Bellamy, I think two receivers that make a lot of sense. And when you look at their defense as a whole, you have Jamal Adams, you've got Leonard Williams, you've got C.J. Mosley now. You could very well be looking at adding Josh Allen. Maybe Nick Bosa falls in your lap. Maybe Quinnen Williams falls in your lap. Who really knows at the 3rd overall pick? But you've got an ability to add more players to your defense. And keep in mind, this is a team that has the ability to maybe even trade down. I don't know what teams are going to be calling about a quarterback. I think the Giants are not going to take a quarterback. I don't think Denver's taking a quarterback. I don't think Jacksonville's taking a quarterback. So we could see maybe one quarterback in the first 10 picks of the draft. But that doesn't mean that we won't see a trade. We always see a trade, and the Jets are very much, I think, in a position to trade because they don't pick again until the 68th pick of the draft. So you go from 3, and then you got to wait 65 turns. I don't like that recipe. So I think that's something that they should consider. But by spending some money now, maybe they get on the Le'Veon Bell, sweepstakes and sign him. I know they're a candidate right now, but we don't know if that's like going to be a for real thing. I know they've given him a deadline, so we'll see what happens. But that's my winner. And then my loser, and then I'll let the floor be yours to close us out. But I think the Ravens are a loser. I think just big, giant losers they've lost their entire defense. C.J. Mosley's gone. Zadarius Smith is gone. The big signing that they had, Nick Boyle, 3rd tight end in their system, signs for 3 years, $18 million. I get Nick Boyle's okay, but you have Mark Andrews.
They have 25 tight ends, so they don't.
Exactly, and you just spent $6 million, and you lost your starting linebacker. You cut Eric Weddle. You traded Joe Flacco. You're doing a bunch of outlandish things, and you lost Michael Crabtree. You lost John Brown. So I just don't know what they're going to do. It sounds like they're going to sign Mark Ingram, so that's a decent signing. They definitely need a running back. He'll probably be their number 1, but they'll probably look at a running back in this draft. But again, with just the money that, they could spend, I'm not saying go out and blow it all and that they have all the money in the world, but, you're picking 22nd in the draft, then 86th, then 103, and then you've got 2 4th-rounders, and then, you get down the line through the 3rd day of the draft. But they have a ton of needs. They need a receiver. I think they need a ton of help on defense. Now, they lost Terrell Suggs as well. I mean, there's a ton of needs for them, and they lost their entire defense, which is what's been their nucleus for so long. And now it's just complete rebuild on defense. So big losers for them.
I'm going to go. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I know there's some pieces like Terrell Suggs and Eric Weddle that they're aging, especially Suggs, but Weddle's still playing at a really high level. And I was listening to an interview with him on NFL Network today, and when I forget who was interviewing him, but he said, well, what do you think about, all your past teammates now jumping ship as well? And he kind of had this distraught look of like, man, I really wish we could play together, maybe 1 or 2 more years. So it seems like, there was a bond there, but now it's breaking up. So maybe Ozzie Newsome kept them all together, and then now they're just dispersing. I mean, potentially a rebuilding situation on the defensive side for Baltimore. But a team I think I don't want to say they're rebuilding, but they kind of are, because it seems like every offseason they're making moves now, especially at quarterback. And so Denver's offseason as a whole, I'm not 100% ready to say they're losers, but I was kind of scratching my head on who they've given up and then who they brought in. You talked about Juwan James coming over from Miami. That is a position of need over at the right tackle spot. Garrett Bowles, he struggled his first couple seasons, but last year, I thought he was actually really strong, one of the more improved players in the National Football League. So it's good to see them partnering him up with Juwan James on that right side. I think the value was a little steep for me, more so because of what they're going to now be paying Joe Flacco. And so I don't think, even if you're sitting there trying to create some kind of foundation on offense, Flacco's not the guy you're going to be, going long-term with. So maybe that does open the quarterback conversation again in the draft. But the offensive line is something that you have to, of course, that's where you want to start your foundation. They give up Billy Turner to go to Green Bay. I say give up. They didn't re-sign him. Mm-hmm. Matt Paradis is now going over to Carolina, which is a great job for Carolina in my mind. One of the more underrated signees of this free agents period so far. And then you give up a guy like Bradley Roby. I know he's not this dynamic corner, but he's super athletic. He has a lot of intelligence. You can just see him when he plays the football. And when you gave up a guy like Aqib Talib a year ago, Bradley Roby was the guy that was supposed to take that next step. He only signs 1 year with Houston for $10 million. And so it makes me figure out that Denver just didn't want him, period, because I think that's a bargain for Bradley Roby, especially for a contending team like Houston.
Yeah.
So Denver, I'm not ready to say that they're a loser, but it's a team that's still leaving me scratching my head carrying over from the Joe Flacco signing.
No, absolutely, especially for a team that's in this win-now mode, it seems like. But they've lost a great deal of players. So we'll see what they do with the draft. We'll obviously cover more here on cover1.net and Cover One, the NFL Draft podcast. You guys can find us on Twitter at RussNFLDraft, @_Christian Page. Be sure to go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. The more you build us up, the more content that we can provide you. So we need your help through this draft season. So make sure you subscribe and all that good stuff. So CP, thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, this is Cover One, the NFL Draft podcast.